Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. On the show today is Matt Malouf. He is a business coach, entrepreneur, speaker, author, and podcast host. And he is on a mission to help entrepreneurs around the world reach new levels of personal and business success and not settle for mediocrity. Matt has a bestseller called The Stop Doing List, which helps entrepreneurs address their most crucial needs and build a thriving business that gives them more certainty, more profit, and ultimately more freedom for the things that really matter in life. Matt and I had a fantastic conversation about the 4 negative mindsets that decrease productivity. I've experienced them all, and I bet you have too. Matt also shares about when we should create a system and how to do that. And then he also tells us some of the best questions to ask of those who have the business that we desire. Lots of actionable information in this podcast, so grab a pen and paper before you listen, and let's get started. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Matt, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Matt, why don't you tell everybody where you are? They are absolutely going to hear your accent. And, people think I have one. I don't think I have one. I don't hear it, but I do hear yours. So tell us where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm down under at the moment. I'm in Sydney, Australia. And it's nice and early here. It's 6 a.m. And it's a beautiful summer's morning.
Wow, that's so fun that you're having summer where we're just now moving into late fall, early winter here. So funny how being on the other side of the world will do that, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Matt, would you share with our listeners a little bit about your business, kind of where you've come from and where you are today?
Absolutely. So my business is Wisdom Consulting Group, and we help and support small to medium businesses all over the world who want to have more certainty, more control, and more freedom in their businesses. And really, it's about helping them create their perfect business. And we've got a program where we call Your Business by Design. I've sort of, where I came from was I started my career in accounting with Ernst & Young. And so I sort of followed in the tradition, the family tradition. All of my dad's an accountant, my uncles are accountants. I soon realized that I didn't fit the mold of a regular accountant. I asked a lot of questions, I challenged a lot of things. And so I then went into the fitness industry and in particular personal training. I opened a personal training gym. So that was my first business. Built that, sold that, and then since then have chosen to go down the road of business coaching and consulting, and have now helped, I think we looked at it the other week, it's about 1,150 businesses in some form of one-to-one capacity over the last 8 years, and really focusing in on helping them grow their profits, have more freedom. And the important thing for me is that their business fills them up. Like, I think a lot of people get into business with this dream that they want, they want to make change or grow a great business that's going to give them some freedom. They end up feeling shackles to their business. So our mission is to help business owners achieve freedom and fulfillment through their business results.
We have quite a bit in common, believe it or not. So you started in accounting, and it was funny. My first major in college was accounting, and I was a couple of weeks into, the degree, and I called my parents and I said, I can't do this. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I actually am enjoying the numbers. I love the logic. I love all of it, but I don't feel like I'm surrounded by my people. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was just like, well, they're very serious. They're very, kind of straight laced. And listen, I love my accountant, right? But I just realized it did not feel like home to me. So interestingly, my first 10 years were with a software development firm that built accounts payable, project accounting. So I went into the software development side of accounting instead of being an accountant. And then moved in to a window treatment company and then moved into coaching and consulting. And I think what's so interesting, and I was talking to another business owner about this concept earlier today, is about kind of connecting all the dots, if you will, that all of those businesses that you've had, all of the work that you've done puts you in a perfect position to be able to share in a coaching and a consulting role today. All of that matters, right?
Absolutely. And, we hear the cliche often, life is a journey, enjoy the journey. And every part of my journey, as you said, it's got me to where I'm at today. And without those skills and the education and the learning along the way, I don't think I'd be able to do what I do today to the level I can do it accordingly.
Yeah. And I think too, one of the things that I think makes a great coach / consultant is somebody who's not afraid to ask the really tough questions. And Matt, you're probably like me in that, trust me, before I've asked a tough question of somebody else, I've asked it of myself. I am questioning, and it's not even intentional questioning. It's trying to understand constantly. My oldest son is very much like that. And we're just constantly trying to ask questions to gather information to either understand or to create, maybe our own outlook or our thought processes. Do you find that has been helpful for you? Maybe it wasn't as helpful in your basic accounting role when you started, but it's extremely helpful in being able to write a book, coach, consult, and then just look in and see other people's businesses from a different angle.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting concept, but I think I feel very fortunate very early in my career, and I can't remember where I heard it, but somebody asked me, what's the real question you're asking right now? And I think too often we're asking a question of ourselves or others that isn't the real question that we're asking. And when you dig a little deeper and you think about what's the real question I'm trying to answer right now, and then answer it, I think that's a big mistake. A lot of people ask all these average questions of themselves and never answer them. And then they may even ask them really good questions of themselves and they don't follow through and answer them. So the goal is in asking yourself a better quality question and then answering it.
And that really takes, I had heard from somebody at a conference I went to a couple months ago that kind of the hallmark of business owners that do really, really well is that they have the ability to be very self-aware, because they then can not only ask those difficult questions or, as you put it, the real question, but then they give themselves space to think to answer it. And I think sometimes, I know you mentioned that time is important to you, and sometimes I think that we don't give ourselves time to be quiet and to be still and to listen to ourselves and to work it out, to be able to answer it. We're so busy going, doing, working, answering the questions that don't matter because they're quick and easy. Do you find that as well?
I do. And I think also too, your comment about space, I think people are asking themselves too many questions in a short period of space. The new program that I've launched, my partner on that and I went to, we were in LA in Redondo Beach at a conference in July. And we went in, it was a 4-day conference, and we had one question that we wanted answered. And we were about to launch this new program. And we had this one question, and we'd ask the question and we'd get an answer. And we're like, no, that's not the answer. We'd ask the question again. For 4 days, we asked the one question. Accordingly, it was like at lunchtime on day 4, we sat next to a gentleman, and he answered the question, and it was like the light bulb went off. And I think sometimes you need to be persistent in your question asking and really dig to get to find the answer. And we must have asked this question of, a dozen people over the course of these 4 days. And I'm talking some amazing entrepreneurs in this room. And each of them actually contributed to the answer that we ended up getting. But because we were persistent in finding the answers, and then we went away and implemented, the results have been amazing.
Because you got a full answer, not a partial answer. Each of them partially answered something.
Yes.
100%. Got it. Which, I think is also a great indicator and a reminder, if you will, that we all need to surround ourselves with other entrepreneurs, like-minded people, that idea of iron sharpens iron. Sometimes the answer was not within you and your partner alone. And not that you couldn't have gotten to that same answer, it just may have taken you longer. And so by asking the question externally, it gave you an opportunity to get input that you could then maybe almost find your own answer.
Exactly. Throughout my entire career, I've always wanted to shortcut and get the answers. When I was at university, the first thing I did was become friends with the people in the year ahead of me, so I could get all of their notes and their assignments and all of their everything, so I could shortcut my way to success. But in business, it's called modeling, and you've got to go out and seek the answer. And I know one piece of advice I give a lot of business owners is look around the world for who's doing what you want to do, and reach out to them and ask them. The advice I give them is, write this email. It says, "Hi, my name is Matt. I'm an admirer of your success in what you've done in business XYZ. I'd love the opportunity to have a 5-minute phone call with you and ask you one question."
Oh, I love it. Because that's not like, I want to pick your brain. Those questions come, hey, I want to go sit down and have a meal, or come meet you and pick your brain. I don't know that anybody wants to feel like their brain has been picked, but most people, because that kind of raises our hackles when we hear that. And we don't like to do it when we feel like our clients are, maybe I'm going to do air quotes, taking advantage of us by asking that. But saying 5 minutes, one question, really dials it in, and almost everybody would be willing to give you 5 minutes and one question.
And every person, 95% of the people I give that advice to don't take it because of their fear of rejection. The 5% that do, get a phone call. And of all the people that have had a phone call, it's never gone for 5 minutes. It's always gone for at least 30.
Nice. So now we just need to see how many of my listeners are going to take advantage of this. 5 minutes, one question. But I think what that also does, Matt, is it makes you really dial in on what is the one thing that you need to know from that person. So there's none of this, what about this? What about that? I mean, you're not like launching your whole business strategy on them and trying to get them to solve all your problems. You really have to dial in on what is the one thing you have to know, which means you need to do your homework way in advance. Look for the answers that are already out there.
Well, it's interesting, Michelle, because I'll often get asked back by my clients, what should I ask them? And so my question, when I have the opportunity to talk to somebody who's achieved the success that I'm aspiring to achieve, is I like the concept from Brian Tracy of zero-based thinking. So my question is, if you lost everything today and you had to start again, what are the three things you would do differently starting your business from scratch?
Mm-hmm. I love that.
And it's really important, and I hope for your listeners to hear how we're honing in. Like, can I ask you one question? What are the 3 things? Often people will ask very vague questions, and accordingly, it makes it really hard for the person in front of them to answer it. And so they tend to go off on tangents and the like. But when you ask somebody, what are the three things you would do differently, or what are the three strategies you would implement straight away? It's a question around that. It enables, number one, the person you're asking the question of actually respects what you're asking them, because it gets them into deep thinking. And their successes come from being strategic and implementing and making mistakes. And for you, it enables you to get an answer that cuts through all of the, the weeds that they've had to go through and gets straight to the gold.
And the beautiful thing is, too, that even if it only takes the 5 minutes for them to answer, it's gold. I mean, you've got pure gold if they are giving you a thoughtful answer to this.
Absolutely.
Right? Regardless of 5 minutes or 30 minutes. So, Matt, I also want to ask you this. I know that you have done a lot. You've accomplished a lot. You have a book, which I'll get you to tell us about in a few minutes, and I'll make sure that we have a link for that in the show notes, as well as your podcast, which is the Virtual Success Show. So I'll make sure we have a link to that. But you also have a topic that you enjoy talking about, which is 4 mindsets that decrease profitability. That intrigued me, and I really wanted to talk to you about that. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about these 4 mindsets that decrease profitability? Since the whole podcast is about profit as a choice, right? So our choices, our mindsets, our actions lead us towards or away from profitability. What are these mindsets that we need to be aware of?
Yeah. So in my book, which is titled The Stop Doing List, I talk about these 4 negative mindsets that you need to reset. And so the first one is when we have that mindset that others can't do it as well as I can. And the reality is that a lot of what you do, other people all around the world do every day. Like there's probably 5 to 10% of what you do as an entrepreneur and business owner that's unique to you and your business. And the rest is done by millions of people around the world every day. And that's not to play down your worth or your importance. It's a reality. You know, I've spoken in front of thousands and thousands of people and asked this question. And the reality is that when you analyze what business owners and entrepreneurs do in a day, a lot of it is not unique. And others can often do it better than you. It's your fear of letting go. It's your being unclear on what would I do with all this extra time that I'd create that holds you back. The second one is more about that whole I don't want to give up control. And remembering that control is an illusion. Control to one person is being out of control to another. And the key for a business owner to gain control is to have strong systems in their business. The reason we don't want to let go of control is because we hold all the IP in our head. And we've tried it often in the past to hand things over, but we haven't unpacked our IP, and hence others can't do it. And we don't want to lose the control because of it won't work, it'll break, we'll lose money, etc. The third mindset to shift is I can't afford it. And cash flow in a business is a reality. So at times, you may not have the free cash flow to invest into technology or people and the like. The reality is, though, there are. I heard of this this app just yesterday, and it's called Get Magic. And it's like you send a message to this. I've got to look into it. I only heard about it yesterday. But you send a message, you buy blocks of 1 hour to have people do tasks for you, like book flights or book restaurants or book hotels. And it's dollars. Like everybody could afford this concept. We choose to have this belief in our head that if I can save $5 here and I can save $20 there, that's going to help. When you leverage yourself, it's an investment, provided you do it properly, and then you can go and focus on doing the things that you love or that are going to make you and your business more money. Or I like to buy freedom. That's the reality. I like to invest into people to do the things that, number one, I'm not very good at. Number two, I just don't like doing, so that I can spend more time with my wife, with my kids, with my family, with my friends, and the like. And the last one is all around, and I phrase it, this all sounds really good. I just don't have the time to implement this. And the reality is, if you don't make the time, you'll never have the time. You'll just keep working. You'll burn out. You will, you'll continue the hustle, and then the self-talk will be, I didn't get into business for this. This is not how I thought it would be. I'm no good at business. And the reality is that's not true. It's about learning that I'm really good at these things, and these are the profit-making activities and tasks that I need to engage in, and everything else over time can be done by somebody else.
Yes, there is a great book called Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz. I don't know if you've heard about it. And
great book.
Yeah. And in that book, he talks about the QBR, or the queen bee role. And that's really this idea that as the owner of the company, what is the piece and part that only you can do? And really getting clear on that, so that then you can let go of all the other pieces and parts, if you will, that kind of breaks through these mindsets, and I love how you have kind of boiled it down to these four. And I would agree with you that I hear these in my coaching practice over and over and over. I know I even have struggled with some of these, as I've built my own firm. Well, so-and-so can't do it as well as I can. I mean, I've got a prime example of one of not wanting to give up control. And you mentioned having strong systems. I had subbed out some work and it didn't come back the way visually that I had thought that it should come back. It looked like a little bit of a mismatch. And so, because I was so hurried, which hits your number 4, like I didn't have time to really implement bringing this person on board correctly. I looked at it as it was their problem, right? They did something wrong. But when I stepped back and really thought about, to your point, have I shared enough of my own IP or intellectual property? Have I told them clear expectations? Have I given them a style sheet from my company that said, here's the font, here's the color, here's the logo, here's the brand? Did I really give them what they needed to produce for me? And the answer was no. And so, part of this problem of being profitable with outsourcing or hiring or delegating and getting this off my plate was I didn't set it up for success by having the time to do it properly, onboarding properly, giving them all of the detail, all of the expectations. It's like later when I looked back at it, Matt, it was almost like I'm thinking to myself, Michelle, what were you thinking? That they were going to read your mind on what they should do and shouldn't do? Like, how did I ever really expect them to get it right?
Yeah, and the metaphor I use for this, Michelle, is often we'll give people the bricks but not the mortar. Mm-hmm. So we want them to build the wall. Here are the bricks and what you need. So that's only part of what you need to build a strong wall. But we don't teach them the mortar. What are the things that sit in between each of the bricks that then strengthen that? And that was what you were just talking about, the briefing sheet, the fonts, etc. Yeah. That's all what I call the mortar. That sits in between. They know how to design, but they only know how to design to the brief that you give them or to the style that you like or whatever. And that takes time to unpack. And it doesn't take a lot of time, but for the listeners, think about the other one I use is if I gave you a recipe and all the ingredients to bake a cake, and I set you on your way, you could follow the ingredients and you could bake the cake. But if I put a Michelin star chef standing next to you instructing you, they would tell you beat the batter at a certain pace, or don't put all the ingredients in at once. Maybe just slowly add the milk or the flour or the sugar at a certain pace, because that'll get a different consistency. You want to make sure that if you've got this type of oven, it's set at this temperature, but that type of oven would be this temperature, et cetera, et cetera. They would give you all of the mortar in between. Same set of instructions, same ingredients, but with a different level of detail.
That is so important. And I know that a lot of my listeners some are solopreneurs, some have smaller firms, and then some have larger corporations. And, we run the gamut here. But processes and systems, even if you are a solopreneur, are still extremely important. Whether you're delegating it to 10 people or not, it's important that we create these systems, because what they also do is they set you up so that when it is time to bring somebody in, you have the mortar, if you will, to go ahead and give them. And I find, maybe Matt, you see this, people wait until they are so overwhelmed. They try to find somebody to delegate to, either a hire they already have, or they're trying to go create a new hire. They don't have the plan, they don't have the bricks, and they don't have the mortar, yet they're trying to hand off a project to somebody who has nothing to build with. Do you see that happening in other companies and industries like we do here?
All the time. And some of the solution we talk around this area is, number one, this is often where you may need to buy talent. So you need to actually invest in somebody who's done the role that you're trying to hand over before, so they can bring their experience. The second option is we will position with the person. Here's where we're at. Here's what we need. In your first 6 months with us, every task that we hand over to you, we need you to create a system around. Mm-hmm. And we set that up from the start. And accordingly, this person comes in and they understand. We create the system for creating a system. And then they can follow that. So everything that's handed to them, they're now building your operations manual for you. And you're so right, Michelle. Often a lot of business owners will leave it too late to start creating these systems. We recommend this rule. If you think it's going to be done more than twice, create the system and create it now. And everybody in our organizations and in the organizations we coach, we recommend to give everyone permission to create a system, but one person has to actually approve it to go into the learning center or the operations manual.
I love that. And when you go to hire the person who's going to create the system, right? So you've already created, I love that, the system for the system. By even knowing that that is going to be part of that role and responsibility, we also know that there's a certain type of person that we have to hire that can do that, because not everybody can think that way. So Correct. That's really a great characteristic to keep in mind, because it is something that we would interview for.
Exactly right. And you can profile for it, you can test for it in the interview process, yeah, exactly right. You need to be very clear about that.
Right. Because some people, they are great at following a system or following a recipe, but they couldn't write one if they had to. And so, to me, it goes back to not throwing a warm body at a problem. We have to really plan to execute it well if we want to leverage our time and be profitable. Because if not, at least from my experience, if we just go hire somebody because we're overwhelmed and we don't have all these things in place, as you have shared with us and we've talked about, it actually takes you more time. And then that feeds back into that, I don't have time, I can't hand it off. It feeds right back into the negative mindset that keeps us stuck. And it is really because we've created this self-fulfilling prophecy by not sitting down and tackling it head on.
Exactly. And one other thing to be mindful of for your listeners, and I think we've all done this at some point in our career, which is it's quicker if I just do it myself. And that rings true in the short term and maybe in that moment. But if you continue to allow that to play out, number one, you'll be inundated with tasks that fall into that category, which is very, very tiring. And number two, you'll never let go. And so what we always teach is that you've got to slow down in order to speed up. And the slowing down piece is that, you know what, it may take you a little bit of extra time, maybe 25% more time on average in our data collection to take the time to hand things over initially and monitor and train and teach. But that will save you so much time going forward. And if you do the math, if you just take a 5-minute task that you do daily and extrapolate that out over a year and then multiply it by your hourly rate, it's thousands of dollars every year that you'd be saving just on a 5-minute task.
I always think about it, and I've used it in some training where I will say, you know, when our children are little, we brush their teeth for them, right? And it's faster, even though we're wrangling a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, we're holding them down, we're brushing their teeth, we're moving on. We are choosing their clothes and getting them dressed and moving on. We're taking care of their self-care things because they're not quite there yet. And there comes a point where we know we need to teach them to do their own self-care. But during that interim of teaching, it takes us longer than if we were to just walk in there and brush their teeth and give them a bath and put their clothes on them, right? Because we're showing them, they're fighting us, they're learning, we're instructing, and we're going through it multiple times. There's a little bit of a testing of the wheels. And we could be challenged to think, it's not worth it, just let me do it. But if we do that, we're going to go off to college with them. We're going to be married with them so that we can brush their teeth and change their clothes, all those things, you know, and it seems ridiculous to us that we wouldn't teach our children to take care of themselves. But it's that same thought process that says it's just faster if I do it. It's faster if I clean the kitchen by myself. And then we're the ones stuck with all the work on our plate.
And what's interesting, most business owners have 5 to 10 children.
Yeah. Right?
It's very tiring.
Exactly. It's very tiring. And, you know, finding ways that we can know that maybe that journey of delegating, educating is going to take a little bit more time. It will be a little more time intensive in the short run, but in the long run, it creates space and time for you to spend energy elsewhere. And then at some point when that other resource really comes into their own, to your point earlier, they almost can do it better than you could have done it. They see it differently when they really can embrace it and feel empowered to make decisions around, you know, whatever it is they own in the company.
And that's actually the mindset to adopt going in, that my intention is to train this person so that they can do this better than I ever will, because they've got a desire to, their skill set. They bring an existing skill set that I can add to. And when you go in with that mindset that you want each of the people in your business to do their piece better than you ever could, it's actually like the weight of the world gets lifted off your shoulders.
So what is the fear around that? I mean, you know, if we really were bursting through the fears in this, there is a fear for some that, and probably for most, that once they work through it and they realize it's almost like a manager going, I've got to be the one that looks good. And if they would finally realize that as long as their employees are doing their best, that manager will always look good, right? But if we're working and only thinking so much about our own self-preservation, then we're not, it's not going to always turn out great. What is the fear of having people on staff that know more than us in any area?
I think, I look at it. If you Michael Gerber in the E-Myth talked about the 3 levels of, you've got the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. A lot of business owners and entrepreneurs that I meet don't understand what their role as an owner, or this concept of working on their business, not in their business, is. And so their comfort zone is to do the work, because the harder I work, the more I'll make. And in the startup phase, we've all been there, where you need to roll your sleeves up and work hard and create your concept and get some customers. But in answer to your question, Michelle, I think it's fear of the unknown for many entrepreneurs. They actually don't understand their role if they were to let go of this and people become better than them at it. They don't understand their role in how to take the business to the next level. So fear of the unknown.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because when we are no longer doing those day-to-day tasks, right? So the employee task, if you will, the technician task, it does free up space and thinking, and our role does shift. The more that those that are working for us and with us, the more they take on, the more we are challenged. And so, wow, I can see that we are, in some ways, like, this is comfortable. I know what to do. But if you take away what I know how to do, then I'm going to have to be sitting in the space of what I don't know how to do.
And then there's also, to take that one step further, I know what to do, and I understand the reward that comes back from that effort.
Yes.
Whereas
go ahead.
When they move up, because of the unknown, they don't understand what their effort is going to return.
Okay, so I was speaking to a gentleman the other day, vice president of a company, and his job was changing, and he was moving kind of up, if you will. And so it was interesting, because his manager, his executive vice president, whatever, had come in and said, here's something that we're going to do. We're going to move you in more into this role. And the gentleman that I was speaking with, his comment was, but there's not a very clear job description. And I said, that's because the further up you move, the less clear the description becomes. The description becomes, hold it together, move it forward, keep it between the ditches, set the direction. It's not as defined as it would be as a technician. Click here 3 times. Do you know what I mean? And so he had to stop and go, okay, wait a minute. I need to sit with that for a few minutes and realize that it is so much more of a strategic decision-making process the higher up you move in the company, which is exactly an EMIT. The more you're moving up to manager and to technician, or to entrepreneur, it very much is that it's a little less defined.
It's less defined, and you're doing fewer things.
Yes.
Like, you don't have this huge to-do list, but everything that you're doing at that level is of greater value.
Yes, massively important. Everything matters at that level.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I now that I'm just thinking about, I love these conversations. This is why I love having a podcast, because I get to have these like deep thinking conversations. But that is really, I think, kind of the crux is some of us maybe think, I don't know what to do, or I know what to do, I don't know how to do, or even what am I going to do with my free time now? As if it's a bad thing to have free time, because we've been so maybe used to working 80 hours a week. We don't even know what to do with ourselves if work weren't that hard.
Exactly. And the other thing is, a lot of people don't feel they're worthy of having free time. They should be working. They should be working harder, doing longer hours. It's really, really interesting. And one of the things you mentioned earlier, Michelle, was the queen bee concept that in the book Clockwork. In the Stop Doing This book, we adapted a concept from Dan Sullivan on the whole genius concept. And so one of the things that we teach in the book is all around helping business owners identify their quote-unquote genius. Mm-hmm. And the definition of genius is activities and tasks that you love to do, that you do really well, and that are profitable to you and the company. And when you really start to define that list, there's not a lot that fall into all of the criteria that you love to do, that you do really well, and that are profitable to you and the company. So there's four boxes to tick there. I think there's plenty of things that people are really good at and that are profitable, but they don't necessarily love. When you fill your day, we teach you want 60 to 70% of your time in Genius. And when you spend 60 to 70% of your time doing the things that you love to do, that you're really good at, and that are profitable to you and your company, number one, you'll make more money. Number two, you'll actually be really clear on what you need to be doing in your business and in your life, for that matter, to have a profitable life.
Wow, 60 to 70% of our time. So that leads me to another question for you. You talk about the concept of firing ourselves. So if we were to see that 60 to 70% of our time was spent on these genius activities, right? That means that we can't do the other 60 to 70% of the things that we were going to be doing. So how does that fit in with firing yourself?
So the concept is in inverted commas when we talk about firing yourself, and it's firing yourself from everything that's not your genius. So the concept is do the things that you love, that you're really good at, that are profitable, and fire yourself from everything else.
Do you find that business owners feel like maybe they need permission? I know many of the people that I talk to, they're like, I just needed permission to do that. I just needed somebody to tell me it was okay. It's almost like, Matt, in their gut, they know that they need to act in a different, to delegate, to fire themselves, if you will, to do those things. But they almost fit, it almost fits back into that, but I've got to work really hard. I've got to be the one doing this. It fits all the way back into those 4 negative mindsets that keep them stuck or keep their businesses from scaling and growing and morphing and changing. Why do you think that is?
It's so interesting you talk about the whole permission thing. I ran a workshop 2 weeks ago titled Plan Out Your best 2019, and I give everybody a calendar, and you put categories, and at the top is personal, the bottom is business. And I'm like, in this top left-hand box, you're going to write holidays or vacations, and the first thing we're going to put into this calendar is your vacation time. And they all look at me like, really? And I had one person raise their hand and say, that's the first time I feel like I've had permission to put my holidays first. Normally I'm putting all of my staff's leave and I'm organizing everybody else, but not me. And I think that there's this unwritten, quote unquote, set of rules that business owners believe they should work the hardest, be in first, leave last. If I'm not working, others will think poorly of me. And so we create all these negative, untrue rules on how business should be. And then when somebody comes along and says, oh, well, actually, you can do it this way, and that's totally okay, they feel like, oh, wow. And as you said, it's like they've been given permission. There's no rules in business. There's principles, there's proven methodologies, but the thing I love most about business and being an entrepreneur is that we set our own rules. And so remember that and let go of this concept that I should do it a certain way.
Yes, that word should kind of catches us up. I know I teach something very similar when I do a lot of year-end planning for the next year, planning for the new year with my clients. And one of the things I always have them do is very similar to your exercises. I will say, I want you to not think about business for a minute, but I want you to start by telling me what you want your next year to look like? It's look forward and look back. So look forward to the end of, let's say, 2019. How do you want to look back on 2019? So you've already accomplished it. What did you do that was so awesome? Tell me where you went, how much vacation time. Tell me what it was. We always hear, especially for women, we hear this whole balanced life. I don't ever hear men talk about it quite as much as I do women. It comes up all the time. And I'll say to them, instead of thinking balanced, think centered. What is it that makes you feel? What was it that made you feel centered over the year? Was it that you had a girls' night out? Was it that you went to the zoo with your kids? I don't care what it is. Make a list. And then we do it. We calendar that first. Because if we do, then we realize where business needs to fit. Now, you can't come in and calendar 48 weeks of work, right? Or 48 weeks of play and 3 weeks, 4 weeks of work and think that you're going to make this work in most cases. But it does put it into perspective that the only way to have that life that we want, that permission to take the vacation, is to give it to ourselves. There's nobody else that can really give it to us.
Well, we chose to be entrepreneurs and business owners to be our own boss. So I often say, apply the rules that you apply to your team to yourselves. And in a lot of instances, you'll be happier.
That's right. If they can take vacation, you should take it. If they get paid a wage, you should get paid a wage.
Exactly.
So do you have any suggestions if somebody says, okay, Michelle, Matt, I've listened to this podcast and I am feeling some of these mindsets that you're talking about. I don't know how to fire myself. I still think that other people can't do it like I can. I'm a control freak. I hear that. I'm a perfectionist. I don't want to give up that control, or I don't have any money. I can't afford it. When's the right time to afford it? What would you say to them to help them in that one moment get unstuck?
The question I ask when I hear that is, what do you really want?
Mm-hmm.
And then the secondary question to that is, why do you want it? Because we can create the story and put all the roadblocks and make all the excuses in the world. When we're very clear on what we want, and more importantly, why we want it, when we've got enough reasons to want something, it's amazing how quickly our story changes, how quickly we can focus on doing the higher value task, how quickly we can hand something over, how quickly we can implement something as simple as that Get Magic app to save an hour a day. It's in my experience, when you don't have clarity on what you want and why you want it, it makes everything else harder.
It's funny. I've been asking that question a lot this year. What do you want? And I think I've shared it on the podcast before. So my husband and I were watching Netflix, and we were watching, I don't know, I think it's like 7 seasons of Scandal. And I don't know if you've seen that. It's pretty much this woman who owns a company that is a fixer. So they're working in Washington, D.C., kind of fixing all these things that happen. And of course, people are coming in to negotiate this and negotiate that. And somebody's been caught doing something they shouldn't, and they call her in. And her question to them, rather, Matt, is always, what do you want? I know you're telling me all these things that you want, but what do you really want? And then sometimes she'll say, I know, but what do you want? And so she almost has to ask it sometimes 2 or 3 times to really get down to the core of what they want. And then she'll ask them why. And then she'll say, okay, let's go make it happen. And there's a lot of other crazy stuff that happens in the Scandal series, but I so understood that question, and it has resonated with me this entire year, even to ask myself continually, because the answer changes. In this season of life, in this season of business, what do I want? And I know when I started my business back in 2000, my children were, 2 and 4. And what I wanted out of my business then is very different from what I want out of my business today, where they're 21 and 23. And I think asking that question over and over in different seasons, in even different times during the year, situations can shift and change where what we want changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. You've got to ask the question more than once. I think what happens is people ask the question and they get the clarity and off they go and they forget to ask it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they get in their own way. And you're right. And I like how you said, ask it multiple times throughout the year. I think it's an important little check-in. What do I want? Do I still want what I set out to achieve? That's another one. Because you may start down a road and go, you know what? This is not what I thought it would be. It's not how I'm envisaging it. It's different to the way I saw it panning out. It's not actually what I really want. We want to go down this road. But do it from a strategic place, not a bright, shiny object place.
Yes. And I love the title of your book, Stop Doing It, because I also think that it's important, like even when I create a to-do list or a task list, I go back and look at it. And it is very easy for me. One of my top strengths is achiever, which means I always cut up on the podcast that my task list literally like replicates overnight. You know what I mean? It has babies. I'll go to bed with 3 things on the list. I'll wake up, there are 15. It's just what happens in my life. But I've given myself permission to look at that list and go, what no longer serves me? Take it off. What's not getting me where I want to go? Take it off. What's busy work? Stop doing it. Get it off. Give it to somebody else. Or I ask myself this question: if it doesn't get done, what happens? And if I can live with it, I take it off. I just don't do it. Because I sometimes create busy work to fill in that time and space that we've talked about creating. And then I'm always busy.
Exactly. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's about asking a better question of yourself.
Yes. And having the awareness and the space to sit and think about it.
Absolutely.
Matt, I know you have learned a lot and you are now, researching for yet another book. What would you say were one or two of the biggest lessons that you have learned in business? I'll turn that 5-minute question on you. What are one or two things that you think are, if you had to start over again, what do you think that would be for you?
So number one is be very, very clear on your short, medium, and long-term goals. We started a new program this year, and we sat down and we planned out, here's where we want to be in the next 3 months. Here's where we want to be in the next 12 months. Here's where we want to be in the next 3 years. And not lofty, vague goals, very specific. I think clarity is power. Number 2 is less is more. So doing fewer things really, really well will make you more money and bring you more fulfillment than trying to do everything. And the third thing is learn from others' experience and implement fast. So you can go on this journey of trial and error. I've always been of the opinion the answers are out there. I've just got to go and find them and then implement them fast. I remember hearing I can't remember who the quote's from, but knowledge is only potential power. That's what we choose to do with it. That is the real power. And the business owners that I see succeeding more than anyone else are those that implement well and fast.
Yeah, I do think there is definitely knowledge is power, and knowledge is great, but it only gets you so far. You have to act on what you know, which then becomes experience, right?
Exactly.
So Matt, what is one of your next big profit goals in your business? Speaking of profit in any way.
Yeah. Number 1 is to stick to my 3-day work week. So I've made the decision to move to a 3-day work week. So to have more time to spend with my young family. I've got an 11, 8, and 4-year-old, so I want to have more time to take them to school and be part of their activities and the like. The second one is to write another book. As I said, the working title is Leverage at the moment. I don't know what it looks like, but really, really excited about the process and journey that I'm going on to write this book. And they're probably my 2 biggest profit goals at this stage.
That's fantastic. Well, you'll have to come back when you get closer to the book launch, and we'll have to talk about leverage, because I already know that's going to be a topic that I'm interested in, and I know my listeners will be as well. Matt, where can people find you? Where's the best place for us to find you? I'll have it in the show notes, but I'll let you tell us as well.
Yeah. So the best place is to go and have a look at the book site. So it's stopdoing.com.au. There's some free resources there for you to help you create your stop doing list. And just quickly on that, the whole concept of stop doing comes back to that point I made about less is more. Mm-hmm. And when I first created my first stop doing list, it was very empowering, and that's what led me to write the book. And I highly recommend you need a to-do list and a stop doing list that sit next to each other on a daily basis.
I heard a business owner share that when they were really trying to get their mind wrapped around delegating and handing things off, every single time they did an activity, they asked themselves, is this something that I want to continue doing, or would I like this to be the last time I ever do it? And if in their mind they thought this is the last time I ever want to do it, it went on the stop doing list. If it was something they thought they wanted to continually do over and over and over, at least for now, they left it on their to-do list. And I thought that was a great way to think about it. Is this the last time I want to do it? And put it on that list. It might not mean it's actually the last time, but it's the thought process that puts it on the list that makes you think you can hand it off.
Correct.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm excited to get your book, Stop Doing, and to read all through it. I know I'm going to probably be highlighting and underlining and putting my Post-it note flags all over the place. And I just really appreciate the insight that you have shared with me and with the listeners today.
And thank you for having me.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you for joining us today. I had some aha moments in the discussion with Matt, and I hope you did as well. As you're considering if you can delegate either internally or externally to your business, the financial conversation always comes into play with the big question, can I afford it? Head over to my website, scarletthreadconsulting.com, and click the purple bar at the top to take the health checkup for your business. It will provide some of the insight you need as you take the next step. Thanks again for your time to listen to the podcast. And remember, profit doesn't happen by accident.